I mean, my first book, Wings, has only 12 words in it, and they all rhyme, you know, and that one, like, even more, I I was trusting the illustrator because it was entirely dependent on the illustrator to like really craft what the action was and the emotion of this little bird who's trying to fly for the first time. Um, and Tama DePaula did the illustrations in that. And at first, I will tell you, at first, like when Emma edited that book too, and at first when she pitched him to me, I was like, I'm not sure about this because I mostly knew him from like the Stregonona books and things like that. And I knew he was a wonderful illustrator, but I wasn't sure. I thought maybe somebody with more detail was needed to flesh out a text that had only 12 words. And Emma said, no, he really loves drawing birds, and I think he'll do a great job with this. And then when I saw his sketches and the final book, like his very elemental shapes, like his strong, plain shapes, like ended up being the perfect counterpoint to my text, which is like all about the shape of the words, you know, like I'm getting very mystical here, kind of.
I'm nodding like I understand. I don't understand. Please explain.
Okay. Like the text for Wings runs wings, and you see a little bird flapping her wings, clings, and then you see the bird at the edge of a nest, flings, and she flings herself out of the nest, and then you see her falling, and then stings because she crashes on the ground, rings because she's lasted in a puddle, and so she wrings herself out, and then dings, and she's hurt her tail a little bit, and it goes on from there. But you know, it's a very simple text. It's providing just basically the plot structure of what she does, and providing the pleasure of the sound of the words altogether. And for readers, the pleasure of guessing, like, what's going to be the next word, because obviously they all have to rhyme. And but because there's no sentences there, you know, there's just like one part of speech per spread, basically. There's like one noun or one verb. That's it. Like that's what I mean by it being very elemental. Like there's just one very strong element in that word. It's not like a very rococo, long, flowery sentence or anything like that. And so in that way, like Tommy DePaola's illustration, with his style being very blocky and being, you know, a lot of strong lines and very simple shapes, like that was a good match for the sound of my text. Does that make sense?
That does make more sense. I got you.
Yeah, visually, it was a visual counterpoint to the sound of my text, and so that made them a good partnership as words, as for words and pictures. In the same way that like Chin Ling's illustrations, bringing out all the character, really filled in the backstory and everything else for my text, which sort of outlined for A Year of Everyday Wonders, which sort of outlined all these character things that happened, but didn't elaborate on them. Like she was able to elaborate on them visually.
Gotcha.
Whereas I just provided the structure and the space for all of that to happen. So I obviously think about this a lot. I don't mean to praise my books as like, oh yeah, I wrote a great book, blah blah blah. But I do want to praise.
If you didn't think that, why'd you publish it? Right?
Well, that's true. I'm a Midwesterner. I have to denigrate myself.
Sure, I understand.
I'm not allowed to be unself-deprecating by my own cultural standards. But no, I do think they're good books. But I really do also think that the great amount of the credit for that goes to the illustrator and how well the choice of the illustrator matched what I was doing in the text. So, and coming back to what you say about confidence, like I had confidence because I believed in my text. I believed in the illustrator. I believed in the editor. And I really, really love picture books that do tricks of the kind I'm describing. And by tricks, I mean like having a picture book text that's only 12 words. That's kind of a neat trick to pull off, you know? Or having a picture book text that is just composed of little phrases, like one of the picture books I come back to again and again. No, I don't have it here. I don't think. I actually have a copy of it floating around just recently. Is A Hole Is to Dig by Ruth Krauss.
Okay.
And if you've never looked this up, this is a book from the 1950s, illustrated by Maurice Sendak. But it's called A Child's First Book of Definitions. And it's all things like a hole is to dig. A hole is to put a seed into. You know, a hole is to, hole is for a dog to bury a bone in. Like, it's all definitions like that. And it's very modular, kind of. Like, there's lots of pieces that come together to form the text of the book. Okay. And that makes it a neat book. And I love books that do cool things like that. Like my favorite picture book, one of my favorite picture books ever is Charlie Parker Played Bebop by Chris Rashka, which has entire spreads that are nothing but scat, like in the jazz sense, like the way Ella Fitzgerald scatted, and it's just like barbecue, barbecue, barbecue bar, you know, like overshoes, overshoes, overshoes. Oh, this is actual text in this book, and it really makes you aware of the pleasure of saying those words out loud, and it goes really well with the illustrations, and the book itself like ends up embodying the spirit of bebop in both its text and its art. And I just think it's magical. I love it. Every single time I read it, I am delighted by that book. And I feel that way about most of Chris Rashka's books. He came into the office once when I was working at Scholastic, and I like peered over the cubicle like he was a Backstreet Boy or something like that. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Chris Rashka. And I still feel that way about a lot of his books. Just because they do such cool things in the space that a picture book makes. Because the picture book is like such a cool artistic space. Because it's got a very regimented, oh Lord, I can go on about this all the time. It's a very regimented form. It's usually, 32 or 40 or 48 pages, and it can't be any more than that, and it can't be any less than that because that's the way you print it. And within that, you have to find the right text to work with the illustrations to make a story that flows from beginning to end within this confined space of like 15 spreads and 2 single pages at the beginning and end. And you have to like work in certain things that are important to the form, like a title page or something like that. And it's like writing a sonnet when you're writing a picture book, because you have to make everything fit in the form. But then you add all the stuff that comes in from the visuals, like what are the things that you don't want to say because you know that the illustrations are going to pick them up. Like with A Year of Everyday Wonders, like all the stuff I didn't say about the character because I knew that the illustrator could fill them in. And so, yeah, it's a magical form, and there's so many cool things you can do with it. And I feel like, and I get really excited about working in books that I get really excited when I find books that are doing those cool things. Like I've got a book coming out that I'm editing that's coming out a year maybe. I'm not sure exactly, but it's a little ways off. But it's by a man who identifies as autistic. It's called Flap Your Hands by Steve Asbell, and it's a book about the practice of stimming, where neurodiverse people and autistic people sometimes do a certain kind of repetitive motion in order to emotionally calm themselves or center themselves, or because it feels pleasurable. And it might be like waving your hands in the air or clapping them or something like that. And it's a thing that like we non-autistic, I think allistic is the word, people do as well, like when you might just like tap your fingers on your leg or something like that when you're bored. Like we all stim, even if we don't think about it. I'm
a notorious hummer.
Yeah, yeah, and so the book like celebrates the practice of stimming, and it does it in this really cool visual way where it shows 4 different kids like sort of doing their own things, and then it all comes together and unites. So it unites them in the pleasure and the practice of stimming, and so it's doing the kind of thing I love the most, in that it's a neat book that is doing something cool visually that can only be done by the picture book form over the 32 pages. But in this case especially, it's representing a group that has not been represented before. Like there haven't been a lot of picture books about autistic people, and there certainly haven't been very many written and illustrated by a person from that community who's speaking from within that community. And so I'm hugely excited about the book, and I'm bringing it out because, like I said, it does all the things I like best.
And that'll be available when?
Either late next year or early 2022, and the things are sort of up in the air with a lot of stuff.
It's been that kind of year, sure.
It's been that